going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition, taking a look at two Kentucky Derby prep races this upcoming weekend. One on Saturday, one on Sunday. Saturday, the Louisiana Derby down at the fairgrounds. Sunday, the Sunland Derby out at Sunland Park. You can find this program a number of ways. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure the bell icon's lit up so you get everything that DRFTV has to offer, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe. You write us a little bit of a review. You give us a positive rating. It's always greatly appreciated. Questions, comments, and concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or over on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Again, we're going to go into those two races. We'll use Formulator. We'll use some replays, go over some notes, some observations, X, Y, and Z, you name it. So we're not going to waste any more time. Let's go right to it. The first race that we'll go over is the Saturday. I believe it's the Saturday race of the day. It is the Louisiana Derby for the 3-year-olds down at the fairgrounds. All right, the Louisiana Derby down at the fairgrounds on Saturday, race number 13, 1 1/8 on the main track. I believe 100 Derby points go to the winner. Top two, basically, you lock yourself into the Kentucky Derby field. This one's going to be a little bit difficult for me to go over simply because, for political reasons, I can't show replays from the fairgrounds. So we'll work around that. We'll use a little bit more of the actual in-depth formulator piece where we can go through and filter through some different things. War of Will, I've made no bones about it. I've been a fan of this horse basically from day one. Even when he was on grass and he wasn't quite getting the job done, he was running tremendous races, but he was just more of a speed horse. Then they moved him over to the main track that was on an off-the-turf race at Churchill at the end of his 2-year-old year, and the sky has just been the limit for him since then. He's been fantastic. I think he's going to take a world of beating in here. I think he's strictly the horse to beat, but I'm not going to pick him. We'll get to my picks here momentarily. You can see the 87 up here. I think at least that number is what it's going to take from a buyer standpoint. At least a 105 raw time form rating, if not higher on both of those scales. If you have not hit those numbers just yet, no worries. There just needs to be reason for me to believe that we could be approaching those numbers and eclipsing them here. Let's start off with the local prep for this race, the Risen Star. You see Royland coming out of that race. A number of horses are exiting the Risen Star. Again, I can't show the replay for it, but what we will do, we'll actually go to Formulator. And if you've never used it before, you can see all these different hyperlinks. You can click on these. It will bring up the PPs of the horses. So you get a number of things going for you here if you've never used Formulator. My personal favorite pieces of Formulator are these little drop-down menus here where you can go through and look at a number of different pieces. First things first, to me, the overall sort of landscape and the bigger picture look at this race, the Risen Star, it boils down to pace. We talk about pace making the race. I think there is every reason to believe that this effort from War of Will is about 15 times better than maybe it even looked at face value, because take a look at this. This horse is basically pressing the pace throughout, taking over at the 3/4 mark, okay? Take a look and see where everyone positioned second, third, fourth, and fifth was at that moment in time. So when War of Will has taken the lead by a half length, the runner-up Country House is in 9th, the third place finishers in 13th, 12th, and 11th. We have horses coming from way out of it. This pace essentially melted down. Now, it doesn't look like it was blistering, 23 and 3, 47 and 1, 12 and 1 for 3/4, but there is still something to be said about the fact that, yes, it clearly was a more sort of aggressive pace than it may have looked at face value because there was no one around. And I understand some of those horses were overmatched, but there was no one remotely close. War of Will was able to put the speed horses away and still go on with it rather comfortably, while the horses basically second through fifth, they all came from a country mile out of it. There's a part of me that says you need to upgrade that effort from War of Will in a major, major way and perhaps downgrade those horses closing into that sort of situation most recently. Something else to keep in mind when you go through, you can take a look and see who has done what in their next race. So I've filtered that. There's only been one horse that's exited this race and come back to do any running period. I'm not suggesting any running on the track. There's only been one horse to exit this race and run so far. That was Dunf. He was the 12th place finisher. All he did was come back and earn an 86 buyer. So that at least gives you reason to believe that these horses up here toward the top, they should move forward. They should improve from a numbers standpoint. I like to look at the incremental pace as well, where you can go through and you can break down bit by bit and see how fast these horses ran at any given point throughout the race. To me, the finish, we're getting to the time of year where the finish is very, very key. Because if these horses don't have a finish at a mile and a 16th, or now especially at a mile and an eighth, how the hell do you expect them to finish at a mile and a quarter? And that's when, many people will say the running is basically done at that point. You still need to at least chug along and actually get to the wire. So maybe you're not making up a ton of ground, but you need to at least have something left in the tank. Then you can see, given the fact that these are the horses that were closing from the back of the pack, compare those to the final time here, or the come home time of War of Will. By no means are they exceptionally faster than War of Will, and that's why I think this effort from War of Will is so much better than it looks just at face value on paper. I think this is a big effort all around, no question about it. And for those of you that have never used Formulator, again, you can go down, you click on Form Notes. We'll go through and take a look at these. I only made 3 notes because there were 3 that I thought were noteworthy coming out of there, but you can go through and see what the past 10 races of these horses are as far as buyers are concerned, what they've earned, X, Y, and Z. So Royland. I thought he took advantage of a hot pace situation. I thought he ran on nicely at the end. I think, to me, I would like to see him prove to me that he is actually quite that good. I would be using him underneath, if at all, in this spot. Lemniscate is a horse trying dirt, going 2 turns for the first time. He's tried dirt shorter in the past. He's run some of his better races there. Broke his maiden going 2 turns on grass most recently. He's a Florida bred for Kenny McPeek. The 5th place finisher in that race came back and earned a 69 on turf. For what it's worth, the horse 2-back that defeated him last Judgment, he returned and won next out with an 84 at Oaklawn. So maybe he's an interesting sort of candidate. I'm not really thrilled with him. I'm not sold on his chances, especially from a running style standpoint. I think he wants to be forwardly placed. I just don't know that he's ever seen this real kind of speed. And I recognize 45 and 46 seconds for a half mile on sprinting on dirt. Sure, he can do that, but is he going to have anything left in the tank turning for home? I find it hard to believe. It's going to be interesting to see how he is positioned throughout the run. Limonite, I really wish I could show the replay for from the Risen Star, because this is a horse, yes, he took advantage of a hot pace situation, but this piece right here, he was forced to wait behind runners as they were coming around the far turn. Then, once they got into the stretch, he checked a number of times down the lane. He eventually sort of weaved through traffic, and he finished willingly. This, to me, is... he ran a heck of a lot better, I think, than what the page would suggest. I think, to me, he's that kind of horse that I'm looking for, saying, you know what? I think there's a real chance that he could come along if this pace does sort of heat up at any point. I think he's got a big chance to come and run many of them down, if not all of them. I don't know that I want to go as far as to say he's a horse that I really love because of his running style, but having said that, keep in mind, this N1X race at Churchill, he was pretty close to the pace that day. Royland defeated him. I wonder if there's a scenario where Jose Ortiz, who has the mount for the first time, I wonder if he's a little bit more aggressive with this horse, try to get him into the run earlier. Keep in mind, too, that Risen Star was his first start off of a considerable layoff. I think Limonite's going to run quite well here on Saturday. The 4 horse is Sueño. Now, he's one that we can take a look at a replay for. Most recently in the Southwest, I initially thought, I remember Sueño from back at Del Mar, and he was in for a tag in his first couple races. And he ran fine in those. I just never anticipated him to take such a giant step forward here as he has as a 3-year-old. Keith Desormeau's done a great job with him. His versatility, his tactical speed, I think that goes a long way. Let's take a look. This is the Southwest Stakes. Now, you're going to look at the pink silks in between horses right here. That's Sueño, and it's going to take a little while for him to be able to finally find a seam to split and actually get some running room. Once he does, though, he finishes quite well. Now, at this point, Super Steed looped everybody on the outside. He's got a full head of steam, and he's got a giant head start. Here's Sueño now splitting horses, and again, stream buffering. Hopefully, this thing will take care of itself here more momentarily. I just like the way that this horse, Sueño, eventually levels off and goes on with it. And again, it's a little bit too late to go and get a horse like Super Steed, who's got such a tremendous advantage on him from a just starting standpoint. It's also worth noting, keep an eye on the 9 horse out here. This is Bank It. I thought Bankit had a lot of good things happen for him. A lot of things go his way. Of the 2, I'd much prefer Sueño, who you see angle out now, and he's still coming on. He's still gaining ground on Super Steed. I thought this was a pretty good effort, all things considered, and I think this is one... I'm not going to argue with anyone that looks at Sueño and says he's the kind of horse. He continues to improve with more racing. I see the Atreides. I'm not totally convinced about a mile and an eighth, but I did like the way that he finished at a mile and a 16th. And he was very much flattered by Long Range Toddy here when he comes back and wins one of the divisions of the Rebel last weekend with a 95 buyer. So Sueño, I think he makes plenty of sense in here. Interesting, highest last out raw time form U.S. rating with a 111 compared to the 89 buyer, which is not the fastest last out. So something to keep in the back of your mind. I think Sueño definitely is one that you need to consider in this spot. By my standards, thought this was an impressive effort right here. Really drew off nicely, breaking his maiden most recently for Brett Calhoun. I find it interesting that this horse is owned and trained by the same connections as we scroll through, Mr. Money. Now, Mr. Money has been ridden in the past by Gabe Saez, even through the Breeders' Cup. Gabe Saez decides to stick a board by my standards. Why do I think this is interesting? Not that Adam Biscuits is not a good rider, but I do wonder, you see I have these question marks next to E. I wonder if they're aggressive with Mr. Money, and maybe he's one that goes and pushes the pace early, tries to just make sure that it's at least honest, and eventually maybe we have a turn back in order from Mr. Money, perhaps to help set things up for his uncoupled stablemate by my standards. War of Will, I don't have a heck of a lot else to say. To me, he is just, he's pretty damn close to a complete package. He can make his own trip. He has the versatility, doesn't need the lead, but he can be close. That Risen Star, as I've made mention, I think is so much better than maybe it looks just at face value. I think additional distance is his friend. I love everything about him. He's professional. I just think he's a really nice horse. He is very clearly the most likely winner of this race, in my opinion. 7, Mr. Money, we spoke about. Country House. Now, look, he's another one that I think he's going to be the wise guy horse, and I understand. People are going to look at it and say he continues to improve. Mott, he needs some time, and if Mott has him here, he's here for a reason. I didn't love how green he was down the lane. Now, that's going to sound contradictory to what I say about a horse in a few moments, but the idea is, for me, price-wise. Country House is very likely to be the second choice in this race, somewhere in that 7-2, 3-1, or 4-1 range, excuse me. And I think everyone's going to look at him and say, well, if he runs straight coming down the lane in the Risen Star, maybe he gets closer to War of Will, and maybe here with a little bit more seasoning, he can sort of narrow that gap. I'm not arguing any of that. I think Country House is a primetime player. I just think from a value standpoint, I'm more interested in other sort of prospects, and especially other prospects that might have been a little bit on the green side. I think they can all take steps forward, and I think at a better price. So Country House, I'm not discounting him. I think he can win. I just, at the price I want to take, if I'm going to take a shot against War of Will, it's going to be with a better price than what I'm going to get in a Country House. Bankit, we saw him closing on the outside in the Southwest. Thought it was a fine effort, nothing spectacular. I wonder if he's a horse that eventually will need a turn back in distance. And now we get to the horse that I am most intrigued with taking potentially a shot against. You know what? Real quick, Hog Creek Hustle, nice horse. Don't know about this distance for him. I think maybe going shorter eventually would be better for him. Spinoff for Pletcher and Velasquez. This was a very highly thought of 2-year-old last year. He broke his maiden impressively at Gulfstream. He's gone for a couple months, comes up in the Saratoga Special, runs well enough there. You see Call Paul, who eventually was a Grade 1 winner. Wasn't disgraced there. Gone for a long time. Hadn't seen him since August the 12th. He returns on February the 22nd, going 2 turns at Tampa Bay Downs. Now, everyone likes to just draw the comparison to Always Dreaming, that Johnny V went over to Tampa for one race that day just to ride that horse because potentially he was something going forward. So now whenever it happens, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit. Oh, always dreaming, always dreaming. But there's something to it. John Velasquez isn't just going to pick up and move over for one race, for one day, for one horse, unless he thinks there might be something here. He did it earlier or he did it at the very end of 2018 in New York with Moretti. Now look, Moretti is not panned out, but the notion is you're looking for a Derby prospect. And I think this horse is very, very sneaky. Now from a pedigree standpoint, he's got it. He's by Hard Spun. Now, again, maybe more of a sprinty. Hard Spun can go a little bit either way. But you see the dam Zaftig. She won the Grade 1 Acorn. She was 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. So she was admittedly a little bit of a shorter type, one turn. But when you watch this replay, and I recognize short field, but look at these fractions. Sub 46 off of a long layoff. Admittedly, a day that Timeform US had Tampa Bay Downs main track, slightly speed friendly, but that's Tampa Bay Downs this meet. But you see the opening quarter, 22 and a piece. Here he is in those Wertheimer silks. On the outside, Johnny V, very confident, taking a look over. The interesting thing to me about this race and this horse in particular, he's eventually going to be put down, set down for the drive, and it's going to look a little bit peculiar because his ears are straight up right now. And he kind of just looks like he's bouncing up and down. But he's going to be bouncing up and down and putting lengths on the rest of this field. You can see he changes leads. You see he's just kind of a little bit green. His head's very, very high. To me, I don't know that he is necessarily... This feels like he's just kind of out for a jog in the park. And you see Velasquez keeps kind of getting into him with the stick, trying to keep him to task. I think he's very, very green. Now, again, is green what you want going against, a pretty full field against the best horses you've ever faced? No, not ideally, but at the same time, the logic here is I'm going to get a better price than I would on Country House. Country House needs to prove that he is not green as grass. Spinoff has much more versatility, I think, from a running style standpoint. Heck, Timeform US has him on the lead. Based on that 45 and change, maybe that's going to be the situation. I think you play the break. You see what Gaffalione does on War of Will. If no one wants to go for it. Take it on. Say, come and catch me. I think this horse is really, really interesting. Maybe he will, maybe he won't run. Who knows? As far as he's supposed to run. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying, is he going to perform? I was just very taken by that effort. I think this is a horse that, with more seasoning, he might be a serious racehorse. Spinoff is the only one that really did much for me as far as trying to find someone to potentially beat War of Will with. And ultimately, that's why I decided to go here. I'm going to pick Spinoff over War of Will. I think it could be a bit of a two-speed number. Maybe those two just go on with it. It's a little bit of cat and mouse merry-go-round, but I was very taken by this performance. Maybe this is going to be too much too soon. Maybe the sort of greenness is going to get to him, but he's got the pedigree. He's got the connections. Usually when Todd goes into Louisiana, it's for good reason. I'm going to go with Spinoff over War of Will, who I'm going to pick in second. I still think he's way the horse to beat, and I love everything about this horse. Other than the price, he's going to be odds on in this spot. In third, I'm going to go with the 3 Limonite because I think this race was much better than it looks off the layoff. I think he takes a step forward. Jose has the mount. Then in fourth place, I'm going to go with the 4 horse. I'm going to go with Sueño, and I understand maybe it looks a little bit crazy that I'm going to just basically out of the top 4 throw out Country House. But you know what? When you add some prices, you got to do that some way. I think Country House will be overbet. Sueño, I think, is a legitimate threat in a race like this with his versatility as well. So Louisiana Derby, I think it's a fun race. War of Will is way the horse to beat. I want to take a little shot against him, though, with the number 10 Spinoff for Pletcher and Velasquez. All right, the Sunday formulator race of the day, or the DRF bets race of the day, I should say. It's the 11th at Sunland. It's the Sunland Derby. It's a grade 3 event for 3-year-olds. Obviously, you can get the free formulator past performances over on the race of the day page on DRF.com. I'm going to rip through this field. There's only a handful of horses I think that are actually, I don't want to say important, but I think noteworthy as far as possibilities going forward for the Kentucky Derby. We'll start off down on the inside with the horse to beat. It's Mucho Gusto. You see the 89 buyer, I believe it's going to take at least a minimum 107 raw time form rating. He has eclipsed the 107 rating on 3 occasions, the 89 buyer. He did that in the Robert B. Lewis. We're going to go back and look at that race right now. You see he's already getting ready to take over. Ears are pricked. I loved everything about this performance. Visually, very, very impressive for a horse that he had never displayed the ability to come from off the pace. He had won all of his races in gate-to-wire fashion. There was some reservations for me about how far he wanted to go. I know this is only a mile and a 16th, but it at least allays some of the fears. The way that he powers home, I thought visually it was really impressive for Baffert. And look, he's not improbable. He's not game winner, but I do think he's solid. And you're going to see this gallop out right here. I like everything about it. He's not giving up. He's not letting up at the end. To me, he's just very logical in a spot like this. He's kind of a Captain Obvious horse. And sure, maybe he didn't beat a heck of a lot in Gunmetal Gray and Easy Shot. Who they are, what they are. An Easy Shot, I maintain, he's been running the wrong sort of configuration. I think he's a one-turn sprinter. Gunmetal Gray, just kind of a plotter from the back of the pack. Mucho Gusto, nice horse. And if he gets through this, then all of a sudden, you know what? Why not just add to Baffert's sort of troops going into Louisville? I think Mucho Gusto is very, very talented. I think he's the horse to beat. The horse that I am most interested in is Another Twist of Fate. Now, I'm not picking him. I won't be betting him strictly because from a betting standpoint, I think 3-1 is a bad bet on Sunday because you have no idea if he can run on dirt. But what he has done since they've stretched him out to 2 turns and synthetic up at Golden Gate, he has been spectacular. Now, he didn't beat a heck of a lot in the El Camino Real Derby, but boy, did he do it the right way. You're going to see this is Kingly on the outside in the green. This is another Baffert horse. And Another Twist of Fate just basically flicks him away and goes on. And this is a powerhouse performance. Now, again, didn't beat a heck of a lot. You're going to see him get a little bit goofy coming down the stretch run. He's going to swap to his left lead and then back to his right. If the buffering would hopefully pick up for me here momentarily. In the meantime, I can kind of just walk you through it. He's going to get a little bit goofy. Here he comes. He's going to pop to his left lead momentarily. He's going to be on it for probably 3 or 4 strides, and he's going to pop back to his right lead right about now. And to me, when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I love that. First time he stretched out to a 1 1/8. Number of different things. He'd never really done that before. At the same time, I remember a few years ago when on Twitter, after the Florida Derby, when Nyquist was on his left lead at the end, I didn't like it whatsoever. And Richard Migliori, he commented on it, and rightfully so. He said, you know, sometimes they just get bored out there. And you know what? He had already done the deed. He was well ahead of everyone else. Popped to his left lead. He was bored. Ultimately, that ended up kind of bearing out because he went on to win the Kentucky Derby. With another twist of fate, perhaps that's the same situation. He's 6 clear. You know, what do you want him to do? I mean, I personally would prefer him to be completely professional throughout, but you know what? He's a lightly raced horse. He's only gone out 4 times. I'm going to be fascinated to see what we get here on Sunday on the dirt, because if he can handle it, not only is he a main player in this race, but he becomes a very, very intriguing candidate for the Kentucky Derby going forward. The distance isn't going to be an issue. The sort of professionalism is not a problem. Blaine Wright's a great trainer. The other thing you need to keep in mind, take a look at all these lines that I have drawn beneath his 3 most recent runs. All 3 of them gate to wire fashion. Very unlikely that he makes the front in a race like this on Sunday with the other speed on the dirt surface. He's not only going to need to take to the dirt, but I think more likely than not he'll need to display a new dimension. But I'd be lying if I said I was not fascinated by this horse, and I'm very hopeful that he can take to the main track. And I think this is a good spot for the connections to choose, because if it doesn't work, you can always go to the turf with him. You can always go back to the synthetic. There are a number of other spots for this horse. You just need to find out at this point if he can handle it or not. If he can't, so be it. You're going to have a nice grass and synthetic horse. The number 3 horse is Hustle Up. The 3 and the 4, Wicked Indeed. They both come out of the Mind That Bird Derby. Frankly, don't love the Mind That Bird Derby. If one of these horses wins, I will lose. You're going to see Hustle Up is on the front end right now, and the pink cap, the big gray on the outside, that's Wicked Indeed. To be just straightforward, I've been very underwhelmed by Wicked Indeed in all of his lifetime starts. You see Hustle Up. It's hard for me to sit here and knock a horse that's 8 for 10 lifetime, but at the same time, the pace situation is going to be much different, you would assume, in this race here on Sunday. And you see Wicked Indeed. He's coming along at the end. Perhaps the additional distance of the Sunland Derby is going to be to his benefit. But at the same time, with a horse that I've just been underwhelmed by throughout his career, I'm not going to get on board now. He can win. He would win without me. I would tip my cap to those of you that stick with this horse. I'm using him underneath because I think that's what he is. He's sort of that kind of plotter. He's going to come along and pick up some pieces. Maybe he wins. If he does, it'll be without me. As far as Hustle Up is concerned, like I said, hard for me to sit here and knock this right here. 8 for 10 lifetime. He's just a winner. Todd Fincher's done a great job with him. I just think the pace situation is going to be different this time around, and the quality is going to be different. He's going to be facing much better horses. I don't like Hustle Up in here on Sunday afternoon. The 5 Cutting Humor is the last one that we'll discuss and we'll show some tape for, because this one for Pletcher and Velasquez, if you're looking for the 3rd choice, because he's very clearly going to be either the 3rd or 4th choice, he won't be one of the 1st or 2nd, you could be getting a very nice price on a horse that from a talent standpoint, I think he has it, and I think he can win a race like this. The question now is the professionalism. His most recent start, the Southwest Stakes, he went off as the 2-to-1 favorite. Now, this was on the heels of this race right here. His first start as a 3-year-old. He was bet down to 2-to-1 odds. He's beaten by 2 lengths, but got beat by a good horse in Bourbon War. Bourbon War is going to be one of, if not the outright favorite for the Florida Derby next weekend down at Gulfstream. So he at least kept good company there and first start off a little bit of a layoff. He comes into the Southwest Stakes. Now, this is already a little bit of a quirky horse. Keep an eye on the 3 post. This is where Cutting Humor was breaking from. A little bit of a quirky horse. He's going to get bounced around between early on. Not great for a horse that can be a little bit headstrong. But then watch when the 4 horse cuts in front of him. Doesn't cut him off. He just comes over. And all of a sudden, he doesn't like that. Look at the 3. He's throwing his head about. Johnny V's having a problem. Gets him out into the 4 path. Finally, you think maybe he's going to start to relax a little bit. Not the case. He's going to go up into the clear. He clearly didn't enjoy the kickback. Gets him out into the clear. The problem is now this horse is going to basically just pull himself right up into the run, and he ends up being about a half length off of it as they go into the far turn. There are a number of things that I don't think went right for this horse in this spot. I just think it's a scenario where, you know, do you want to be betting on a horse like this that has some quirks at 2-to-1? Probably not. The good news is on Sunday, you're probably looking at a price closer to 4-to-1 or 5-to-1. And I think at that point you can make the argument that that could be fair value for a horse like this from a talent standpoint. I think he is right there with some of the big boys in this spot. I'm not going to run through the rest of the tape. You kind of know what happened. He ended up fading quite badly. We'll take a look at this right here. You see he ended up finishing 7th in a field of 11. I just think with a little bit of a cleaner and more comfortable trip, I think Cutting Humor is definitely one that has a big chance in here. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, I'm not going to spend a heck of a lot of time. I think Walker Stalker's too slow, Passamonte Man too slow, Collusion is too slow. Diamond Blitz, I don't think he can win this race, but he figures to be prominent from the jump, and I think that's the only way that he could potentially upset this thing. You see his only win is in gate-to-wire fashion, setting hot fractions on grass. Maybe that's where his career will end up ultimately being a grass horse routing, but I think the only chance that they have of winning or even hitting the board in a spot like this, you got to be aggressive and go with them. If that's the case, it works against a horse like Hustle Up. It works against anybody else that figures to be forwardly placed. And the number 10 horse is iCloud, and simply put, I just think he's too slow. So you can tell that I think there's only a handful of horses that figure prominently in this race on Sunday. I think Cutting Humor is a little bit of a value play in here. If you get that sort of 9-2, 5-1 on him, I picked him second in here. He's going to be part of my cold exacta. I'm going to play a 1-5 straight exacta with Mucho Gusto on top. I'm going to use the number 4. If I wanted to play a superfecta, I'd be picking him underneath in 3rd and 4th wicket indeed. Again, I've been underwhelmed by this horse. He could certainly take a step forward for top flight connections. You got to make a call somewhere. I'm not going to have him. If he wins, great. The 3 horse Hustle Up, again, tip of the cap, really nice horse. I just think he might be in a little bit too tough here, and that gets us down to the inside, the 1 and the 2. I think Mucho Gusto is the most likely winner. I think he's the most professional at this point. I think he has shown the most versatility, and I think he's kept the best company. And when you look at another twist of fate, I think he's a bad bet on Sunday, but there is a part of me that I actually want him to win because I want him to be able to transfer that synthetic form to the dirt because I've loved every one of his 3 most recent runs. But strictly from a gambling proposition, I think he's a bad bet on Sunday anywhere in that 5-2, 3-1 range. I would need considerably higher. And then if we get to that point of, where is that line of demarcation when he's significantly higher from an odds standpoint, that should at least raise some sort of a red flag. I think he's a very, very talented horse. We'll find out if he can handle the dirt. So for me, the Sunland Derby, I'm going to chalk out. Nothing special here. Going with Baffert. 1-5, a cold exacta, and then underneath I'd be using the 2 and the 4. But I really do hope another twist of fate runs big in the Sunland Derby. So there you have it, a quick look at those 2 races, the 2 big ones at the weekend as far as the males are concerned, the Louisiana Derby and the Sunland Derby on Sunday afternoon. If you've been listening on YouTube or video.drf.com or iTunes or however you listen to this thing or watch it, thanks for doing so. Again, make sure that you subscribe, you rate, and you review. It's always greatly appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. You can leave questions, comments, concerns over there or beneath the video player on YouTube. Good luck this weekend in the first weekend, the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. If you're gambling on it or you have a bracket or whatever it may be, enjoy that. I will be back at the beginning of next week on Monday afternoon sometime with the recap edition. We'll go over these 2 races and perhaps we'll go over some other big races as well. The girls have got a number of races going on, some other nice stakes races from down at the fairgrounds. So some of those will come up in the quick hit stakes montage and the recap edition. Again, that'll come up later on Monday afternoon. But until then, best of luck, however you play, whatever you play, wherever you play. This has been the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show.